American Magic just had a huge pitch pole, but what I'm interested in is what the damage can tell us about the technology on the boat. Every time a boat has some sort of mishap and ends up either on its side or with fairings removed, it's an opportunity to see what's beneath. And in the case of American Magic, the fairings surrounding their jib system were ripped off the boat, exposing some of the inner workings. Now, the jib systems have completely changed for AC-37. In the previous Cup, you had winches and separate sheets for either side of the boat, and the sheeting angle was changed in a pretty traditional manner. This time, however, they've gone to self-tacking jibs. And honestly, when this rule was announced, I thought, nah, self-tacking jibs are pretty old tech. Pretty much every skiff has this. And when I saw the AC-40s roll out, it looked pretty much exactly as I expected. However, all those preconceptions changed when I saw Ineos's innovative 3D sheeting system. Since then, a lot of the teams have been looking at ways they can fix one of the big disadvantages to a self-tacking jib, and that is the lack of separation between your sheeting point and the clew of the sails. This makes the angle of the sheet really variable as you bring the sheet on, and very hard to precisely control the twist. Now, the usual way that skiffs do this is either by changing the clew board position, which can only be done between races, or changing the tack position on the jib, lifting the sail up and down. With a track, the track is often very close to the clew of the jib. This means any change in sheeting angle is quite drastic just because of the proximity of the clew to the sheeting point. This isn't too bad on skiffs because you basically fine-tune that angle by either moving around on your clew board or moving up and down on your jib tack. And you set that for your upwind, and downwind it just kind of doesn't matter because you've got a huge asymmetric spinnaker up, and the jib being imperfectly trimmed is just something you have to live with. However, on the AC-75s, the downwind trim of the jib does matter because they're not going to have an asymmetric up in front of these sails, so the jib is really important for guiding the flow onto the mainsail. Now, we don't have any photos or video of the actual crash, only the aftermath. We do know, fortunately, no one was seriously hurt, and of all the photos and images, this one does crack me up. It's got Chris Shirley, who's one of the cyclors new to the Cup, with his aviators on. You got a feel for the guy. You know, 1 minute you're tearing around the Mediterranean on the fastest pedalo out there. Next minute, smashed down the mine at 45 knots. Your cockpit's flooded. Your life vest is self-inflated, and you stood there haplessly holding a fragment of the yacht. Yeah, welcome to America's Cup.
Is this your idea of fun, man? Greetings.
Welcome to Top Gun, Goose. So, what does the crash tell us about American Magic? Fortunately, no one was hurt in this incident, but it did rip the fairings off the boat, so let's have a look at what's going on here. So this is normally what we see on American Magic, and you can see it's pretty well faired in. You can kind of make out a faint line here, and can't quite make out in the pictures, but there's another line that goes around here. You can see the holes where it's screwed down. There's a fairing on there as well. But what's beneath is pretty well hidden, and it's got this clever kind of like zip feature where the sheet goes through a hole which is on a zipper, so as the sail tacks, it just tacks with that, and this is like a stretchy neoprene which kind of moves with the sheet. But these fairings were ripped back in a crash, and we get a better look at what's underneath. Here's another picture of the American system, and there's a few things that I always look for when I can see these jib tracks. And the conventional jib track for a conventional self-tacking jib, where you've got the sheet taking off forward in the boat somewhere up near the tack point, and then you've got the sheet going up for sail, is that the track is often aligned so that it runs basically on a line, a radius around the forestay. Therefore, as the jib car moves in and out, the sheeting point remains equidistant from the forestay. That means you're not sheeting on or easing the sail as you move up and down on the jib track. Now, that's not a perfect system because it doesn't quite align the track with the loads in the jib sheet. The loads in the jib sheet actually are a combination of where the sheet is going to, which will probably be actually quite down the leach of the sail, and wherever the takeoff point is going to in the boat as well. But normally on a dinghy, something like that, that's acceptable because the tracks have sort of angular contact bearings and can take those offset loads. But this track here for the new American Magic jib sheeting system is very clearly not angled forward. It's just angled. It's just facing directly up, and is on a bit of a curve which kind of rotates around the jib track point. But it's not a constant radius around the forestay. The sides at either end of the track are not lifting up enough for that. That straight away tells us one thing. First of all, that there must be a secondary loading point, because if that was a single load, it would be, and the loads involved here, it would be really kind of ripping off to the side. So we can assume there's probably a secondary track inboard, so the load can be distributed between two tracks, similar to what we saw on the Ineos 3D sheeting system. We also here get a really good shot. The Recon Photographer overexposes, so we can see down into the hollow, and obviously you can see the jib sheet coming through here, and then I think the turning point for the jib is there, but you can see there's this Harken track, and obviously I'd advise Allen tracks, but in this case you see the Harken track, similar to what they've got on their downhaul. See, same track, and that is running fore and aft to allow them to move this turning point fore and aft to change the jib sheeting angle for the different conditions, but also for upwind and downwind. So you can move this forward for downwind, tighten up the jib leach, add depth into the bottom of the sail, generally get more power. Then upwind, you can move this turning point back in the boat, move it aft, flatten out the foot of the sail, twist off the top of the jib, lower your centre of effort. I guess what else is interesting about the American Magic crash is they had to get pumps on board, and they were pumping water out from the front of the boat. Now you can see in this picture, they've got kind of elastic cord holding in what looks like a plastic bag. And I think that's a way of stopping them getting too much water into this quite voluminous recess below the deck. And it certainly seems it had quite a panic pumping out that foredeck once the fairings were ripped off in the crash. So what that's telling me is that this isn't simply a jib that goes forward and is tethered in the bow somewhere, but that the hydraulics for this jib are based on this carrier as well, and you've got some sort of jib boom or jib post in quite a large open space below this deck fairing. This is what American Magic are doing. What are other teams doing? Like Ineos, who pioneered the 3D sheeting system, Emirates Team New Zealand, who also look to have some sort of 3D sheeting system. Are they gone to boom decks, or is there another option? Well, jumping over to Orient Express, and this is also a proxy for Emirates Team New Zealand. And on this deck, again, you can see when people are walking around, the actual foredeck is very flimsy, very like a big kind of like springy trampoline. And Orient Express has done less thorough job of fairing in this cover, but here you can very clearly see the ring of screws going around this foredeck, and it goes right far forward. So this is a huge area underneath here, going right the way forward. So again, I think it's safe to assume that Emirates Team New Zealand have moved away from the 3D sheeting system they had on Terahutai, that they retrofitted to Terahutai, and instead have this large area underneath the foredeck, just like Orient Express. It's a sister ship, to have a larger jib structure in, which can then be moved forward and backwards, but also hold some of those loads from the jib system. Then we have Ineos. Now, Ineos did the 3D jib sheet system. However, I think they have moved away from that simply because looking at the angle of this track, I said at the beginning of the video, like the textbook way to handle a self-tacking jib is to have it on a radius which is angled up towards the forestay, so that wherever you are on this track you are equidistant from the forestay, so you maintain a consistent sheeting angle and sheet tension. So it looks like they are pinning back to a consistent radius, and here is the Ineos system in use. So again, you can see it's not a huge area going forward where there's a removable fairing, and it looks like you can just about make out the turning point for the jib sheet there. So yeah, pinned back to this consistent rail, and there must be some sort of fore-aft movement in there just to accommodate the different sheeting angle. But yeah, it doesn't look like they've got a whole heap of range of movement on that jib sheeting angle in here, and certainly no openings, like larger opening all the way to the jib tack forward. But finally, and I think this is, I don't know, in my opinion, probably like the neatest way of solving this problem, and this is the Alinghi double sheeting system. Now, this isn't something that's unique to Alinghi. It's actually been used on International 14s, and it's Archie Massey, actually, I think, who did this, and this was a way of him changing their sheeting angle without having to lift their sail up and down and kind of get rid of the end plating from their jib. It's quite a clever system, but quite an obvious system when you think about it. If you want to vary your jib sheeting angle between two positions on a clew board, then just anchor your sheet to two positions on the clew board, and then adjust the relative to get anywhere on a continuum between those 2 points for your true sheeting angle. Now what I like about this is it's not using the car position in the boat, so you don't have anything down in the boat having to move fore and aft to change your sheet angle. That turning point remains the same and consistent, so you can have a single track holding that load, and it's basically just pulling from a different point on the sail. And this means they can have this really nice slender opening with the track with no need for these fancy coverings or sliding fairings. The downside, if there is a downside to this system though, is as that clew board gets closer and closer to the single turning point, is that these two ropes, these two kind of sheets, are almost pulling more and more against each other. So when that triangle cinches down, there's a little bit of wasted energy where you kind of like the two sheets are increasingly pulling against one another. So you tell me, who do you think has the best system? For me, I like the simplicity of Alinghi's, but yeah, obviously some of the other teams have really gone for these below deck carriers or booms. So yeah, you let me know what you think is the best system.